Jake sends a question. What are my thoughts on tapping early versus tapping too early? This is a good topic. This is really, um, um, this hits close for me. When I was my beginning stages of jiu-jitsu, my beginning of my journey, I never wanted to tap. I would rather get injured than tap. I always saw tapping as a point of failure, which now looking in retrospect, I know how wrong I was about this whole thing. And in today's day, I do encourage my students to really, one, don't ever put your health over tapping. Tapping is an important part of learning, of studying jiu-jitsu, and really embracing the submission factor that we put ourselves in. Second point is, in my mind at least, if you're not failing, you're not trying. So putting yourself in vulnerable situations and giving a shot, even though your failure rate might be high, especially at the beginning, is important, because that what allows us to identify areas of improvement and allows us to continue tweaking it, continue modifying things that we do so we can continue improving, right? So not getting injured, extremely important in my mind. If you get injured, you are out for a few weeks, few months, maybe an extensive period of time, maybe even forever. So was it worth it? In my mind, it wasn't. But you might disagree with this, others might disagree with it. Healthy state of my body is extremely important to me. So I always am hesitant of pushing the limit, especially as we all get older. Tapping too early, that's another important part, right? So there's this line at some point where you got caught, this point of time in which you got caught, and that escaping will be challenging. Can you escape? Perhaps, but what is the risk? And there's also this going in the opposite direction. Before this line, we might be tapping too early. We might be tapping from a simple fact of being too concerned. We might get scared. Anxiety might kick in, and it's like, oh, this is happening. I'm just going to tap, right? And again, healthy and safe environment for training is key component. And if this is where you find yourself, where you tap way too early, you tap just because you panicked, I would encourage you to talk to your instructors and finding ways of drilling and understanding how submissions work, or the specific submission that you find yourself in. Why do we tap from a panic perspective? Well, because we don't know what's going to happen next. We've never been there. So think about like a submarine. Somebody told me this story. Second World War, there was an admiral who was in charge of submarines, and one of the very first things that he does is he takes the submarine way below the limits, on the suggested limits by the manufacturer. And they asked him, why are you doing? Why are you risking the submarine plus your entire crew? And his explanation was, I need to know how deep that submarine needs to go before I go into the war. So I know the limits. And the person who was sharing me with the story, compare that to jiu-jitsu as well. So he said, listen, at some point we need to test the limits. At some point we need to know how far we can go, right? And this is not, I don't mean this by you need to get choked out. What I mean by this is oftentimes we panic way before there is necessary point of tapping, right? So escape, by definition, would be removing ourselves from a position of risk, right? So if we tap very early on, we are not even exploring the part of escaping, right? So this is not defending, this is escaping. So defending would be somewhere where we find ourselves at the point of the risk coming at us, and we are defending ourselves from it. Escape would be we are already at that risky position, and we are removing ourselves from that situation, right? So they are two different functions. So in order for us to escape, we need to already find ourselves in that position. We need to identify that position, and this is a high-risk position. I need to remove myself from here, and these are the steps that I will be taking for me to escape out from this risk that I find myself in, for this environment that I find myself in, right? If we tap way before that, we'll never explore our escapes. This is where our escapes will not be efficient. This is where our escapes will have a very low success rate, right? So when can we try this? When should we explore these situations, right? This is where drilling comes in, right? Drilling where the risk is very limited. We have fully cooperative partner who puts us in a situation where we need to troubleshoot and we need to figure it out. This might be one of the reasons why Some of the more experienced grapplers, they don't panic as quickly or ever. They simply evaluate the situation. They know what their risks are. They know how to escape from these positions, and they continuously troubleshoot while this position takes place. Now, don't take me wrong. At some point, they did panic. Several years earlier, I'm pretty confident everybody found themselves in this position where it's like, oh crap, now I'm getting tapped out. And going through these troubleshooting modes, going through these troubleshooting situations allows us, one, to find where the limits are, two, create behaviors and systems, how we can defend, how we can escape, how we can remove ourselves from the situations of high risk. So how do you achieve this? Well, drilling. I'm a huge fan of drilling, huge fan of troubleshooting, huge fan of rehearsing situations and really going through the motions. Not necessarily in a sparring situation. Sparring, in my mind, is a midterm. This is when we are testing ourselves. This is not when we are educating ourselves. Education is a big part of being vulnerable, exploring, being willing to fail, being willing to try new things, and simply opening our mind to brand new ideas. So as you're going through this journey, you will find that there's a line of tolerance, if you will, from tapping too early or tapping too late is going to be shifting and moving depending on the situation, depending on your desire to be vulnerable, your desire to open your mind and try new things. So continue training. Jiu-Jitsu is beautiful, and don't ever put yourself in a spot where you're getting hurt. At the same time, really understand how deep that submarine can go. Keep on training. Peace.